Okay, welcome to the stream, the Digital Village stream. The stream is a virtual meetup where we talk about all things people, technology and business. Last month on the stream we spoke about working from home and the challenges that we faced as people, especially around work-life balance, and then also how organisations were going to navigate that change as well. This month on the stream, we're going to be looking at, now that people are going back to work, and some people are going to be staying at home and working, and other people will be going into the office, how do organisations manage those hybrid teams and make sure that communication is open and people are aligned on what's going on. So the topic we are discussing tonight is, are OKRs, objectives and key results, a good system to better manage those hybrid and remote teams? So down here at the stream with us today, we have Luke Fabish, co-founder and CTO of Digital Village. Digital Village is a professional network of digital specialists of which we create teams and run projects. And we have Jeff Wellman here, partner and CTO of a company called Virtual Human, the business that is behind a blockchain-based horse racing platform. So I'm looking forward to hearing about, because I know that you are also managing a very distributed and highly remote team of developers. And you've been experimenting with implementing OKRs in how you manage that team. So I'm really looking forward to hearing about that. Welcome, nice to have you here.
Thank you.
Then we have Paul Scott, Managing Director of 80/20 Solutions, a modern workplace solutions provider. Paul has experience implementing performance and management solutions in companies ranging from 8 to 2,000 people. So it's going to be really interesting hearing your kind of inputs around different kind of goal setting systems and how OKRs can work and maybe where they can't as well. So nice to have you here.
Good to be here.
Everybody. And my name, of course, is, well, not of course, but finally is Jason Hardy. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Digital Village. And I'll be your host this evening. OKR. We are going to talk about what I said before, which is, are OKRs a good system to better manage those hybrid teams and remote teams? But first, it might be a good idea to talk about what OKRs are. So for those who are unfamiliar with them, perhaps you guys want to share your knowledge of OKRs and how to describe that to someone who probably doesn't know much about them?
Who wants to go first?
I nominate, let's say Paul, since you've had a fair bit of experience implementing OKRs across a couple of organisations.
Very kind of you, Luke.
So,
a little experience. I wouldn't say a huge amount. So OKRs, objectives and key results. So OKRs have a history that goes way back into the 1950s when Peter Drucker wrote a seminal book about management theory and introduced the idea of managing by objectives. And that then led to a whole movement developing around how you could actually make that system work in the modern workplace. And it's surfaced most recently as objectives and key results. It seems incredibly popular now with companies big and small, really. The beauty of OKRs, from my perspective, having implemented a whole range of different kinds of measurement solutions in organizations. During my career in the call center industry, we went around the world setting up call centers, obviously full of people. And you needed to have mechanisms for driving performance and keeping people connected to delivering some kind of an outcome. And in the call center environment, measurement and statistics abound. So there is a lot, they measure everything. literally everything.
We've heard, yeah.
So KPIs became the principal mechanism for measuring results in call centers, particularly when they became outsourced and companies were being driven to use service level agreements to basically determine whether or not they were getting a good result. And then I think as call centers tried to become more differentiated, they started looking for other mechanisms that were more outcome driven. So how they could deliver a better customer experience and what that actually meant. And that's when OKRs begun to come on the scene in my industry. And people started to recognize that OKRs were really good at trying to create a kind of a top-down and a bottom-up way of incentivizing and motivating people to deliver outcomes and results. So what I've been doing in the last 2 or 3 years is applying OKRs in companies big and small and using it as a mechanism to connect people to the purpose of organizations. So what I love about OKRs is it's a very simple process. You normally only have 4 or 5 key objectives for an organization when you start at the top level. And you pass those down to your subordinates and say, right, I'd like you to develop 4 or 5 objectives that align to my objectives and my key results, and for you to do the same thing in the next level down. So it becomes a kind of a trickle-down thing and a bottom-up. But the way that they're created successfully, in my view, is when it's done in a collaborative way. So when you actually get teams of people together, get them in a room, show them a whiteboard, show them the objectives for the business, both financial and non-financial, and the North Star, where you're trying to actually get to, and get people emotionally involving in how you're trying to actually achieve those results.
Sure. So I think on the surface, it could be quite easy to confuse a KPI and an OKR. But what you've just described is a very, very different process to KPIs, which are initially, normally generated by management and then imposed upon teams and employees.
Yes.
The OKR process is something that's developed collaboratively.
Yep. Yeah. Absolutely right, Luke.
Yeah. Jeff, you said you've started using the OKRs kind of almost without realizing it. Is that because they were similar to other processes that you would normally use?
Well, as a small startup, I mean, we've been around for about a year. I guess my business partners, we have some really lofty sort of goals and ambitions. And I'm managing the technical team, which is our biggest team, seeing as we are building a software product. And they're also remote and highly distributed, as Jason pointed out at the start. And because of this, it's really important that we get alignment. An alignment from the top all the way down. And that everyone sort of knows the big goals they're driving for every day, as well as what they're working on day to day, so they can make their own decisions. And so, yeah, like you pointed out that maybe I implemented them by accident. And that,
What actually made you implement them in the first place? Why did you feel that was actually going to be helpful? Or why did something need to change?
So it's probably because I've got my business partners are amazing and they have lots of really good ideas all of the time. And they change a lot.
Okay.
And for me, it's a way of just getting some agreement and confirmation on direction from them, so that I can really empower all of the dev team to deliver on that.
Yeah. And so how have they been set? Have they come from, obviously like strategic levels from above, but is it based on like the vision of the company and then how you plan to reach that vision, or is it more kind of operational? It's like we need to deliver certain kinds of features, or at what level are you setting the OKR objectives?
Really good question, because when I first started, it was definitely around features. It was like, okay, we need to deliver this major feature. How do we break this down and give each sort of skill area of a team a smaller objective around that feature to deliver on. Though, as was pointed out, it's meant to be a collaborative effort. And on reflection, that wasn't as collaborative as it could have been. So now it's more about, okay, where do we want to be, as opposed to what do we want? So where do we want to be could be, we want a seamless onboarding experience for our customers. And that could be an objective. Well, it is an objective that I'm putting in place. And then I open that up to the team and ask them, what can they do to help us move towards that?
So that's how you kind of involve them in the decision making.
Yeah, I mean, that's the next stage in my accidental OKR implementation, yeah.
So what's really interesting about this, Jeff, is, what you're describing is a lot of the principles that we use when we're doing agile software development. It's all about defining what's the problem you're trying to fix, what's the outcome you're trying to deliver.
Yeah.
So it's the objective and the outcome, and that fits beautifully with the OKR framework as well. I think the thing that's often challenging, though, when you're trying to use OKRs in this environment, the one that you're describing, is that for OKRs to be successful, there has to be a kind of a cadence to them. So they're normally set. There's normally, in an organization that's adopting classic OKR methodology, OKRs would be set around an annual goal, a target for the financial year. This is what we're hoping to achieve in FY21. It's going to be, this revenue figure, this number of customers, going into these markets, launching these products. And then from that, developing a set of OKRs for the individual stakeholders in the business, and then asking those individual stakeholders to go work with their team and work up their own OKRs in the bottom. And then you have a review process, which would normally take place once a quarter, to determine had they achieved their quarterly OKRs. So what I'm interested to find out is how you kind of build any kind of cadence into setting an OKR, reviewing an OKR, determining how far you've got, and then kind of resetting the next goal.
Good question. So it was about 3 months ago that I started on this journey, and I'm sort of just coming around to measuring and having that realization that perhaps I could have done it better, and I want to do it better this time. The objectives that were put together by my team individually were less sort of organizational focused and more on their personal development, which is great, but as a business, we've got lots of stuff to deliver as well. So I'd like to have a combination of personal and business ones rather than just personal. How do I measure? That's probably based off their own sort of. It's really hard, to be honest, especially because they were probably the key results I had were more sort of qualitative and off their own sort of feelings about how they were doing,
yes,
as opposed to like how many lines of code they've output, which I would never want to do.
So there's a magic phrase that I've discovered, because we had the same problem when we were setting OKRs with some of the members in our team, which is when they come to actually write the key result, if they can't quantify it, is to use the expression "to the extent that." Because when you actually use the expression, okay, so the result is to the extent that you can, it forces them to then quantify an outcome, right? and it kind of gets the brain engaged into this view that, okay, so if I give a qualitative answer here, I'm going to have to tell people what that means, right? Rather than a quantitative answer, which is, okay, have we achieved that particular measure? It's easier to, determine that it's either achieved or it's not achieved. But if you say to the extent that, then it kind of causes you to have a qualifying statement behind it to match up to the qualitative objective and key result.
Can you give me a specific example?
Okay, so let's
Looking for things to.
yeah. So it might relate to customer experience. I'm going to develop this feature, and it might be a feature that doesn't have a kind of a tangible endpoint because it continually evolves, but to the extent that the user will be able to move to the next step without having to go back to user notes in order to determine whether or not they've completed something. So there is evidence that something's happened. Would be an example of it.
Thank you. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So for onboarding it, for my big objective.
There you go.
To the extent of a user purchasing their first NFT.
That could be it. That could be it.
NFT is a non-fungible token on the blockchain.
Look, we all knew that. We all knew that.
For the wider audience as well.
Yeah.
I guess the main thing is it bringing it back to it being like a binary result, right? That's like one of the main
It is, yes, and it may not be specifically related to the thing, but it's measurable. It's a byproduct of it. Well, if that hadn't happened, I wouldn't be able to do that.
Yeah, very cool. Okay, so that's probably a pretty good intro to OKRs, I feel. So one thing that's happening at the moment over the last, and you've certainly seen, you've been, 80/20 have been, had a lot to do with helping organisations go from purely in-house to working remotely. That's what you guys have been doing a lot of, I know. So, and now everyone's starting to go back to work, and there'd probably be like a mixture of, say, hypothetically, 50% of people back at work, and then 50% like, actually, no, working from home is pretty good. I might just keep doing that. And because also there's, I've read a lot, and that a lot of organisations are finding that working remotely has actually worked better. There's been more productive. Have you found that? Yeah.
Definitely the case. So, we work with a couple of large enterprise clients who had to move very large workforces to work remotely very quickly. And I think there was a huge amount of concern about the impact it was going to have on performance and their ability to manage people effectively. In both instances, it was remarkably painless. The biggest challenges were around their individual technology setups at home and people having sufficient space to be able to get their PC and have their phone there, or be able to have a degree of privacy to be able to conduct phone calls, etc. And the evidence from the customers that we've been working with is that actually once people had established a kind of a working routine, they had a good setup, they had a good routine, they had a strong communication with their colleagues in the office, not in the office, but working remotely. Once they got into a routine and a cadence of working in that way, they were incredibly productive. And we're now seeing a very interesting response to the fact that people are going back to work, which is, for a large number of people, they're enjoying the fact that they can work at home, and they're quite open to the idea of perhaps not spending 5 days a week working in the office, perhaps having 3 days in the office, 2 at home, perhaps doing this kind of rotation thing with their colleagues where they go in 1 or 2 days a week. For me, it seems like it's been a very, very positive experiment, obviously forced on us by a dreadful pandemic, but the outcome has been way better than most organizations had anticipated. I think it has brought some challenges around people's mental well-being. There have been more cases of people seeking help because they find it difficult working in this rather isolated way. But performance has definitely improved, and that's shown through in the results that are being measured using things like OKRs. See what I did there?
Yeah. Fantastic. I love it.
So now that people, we've kind of settled into that now. Like there was a lot of teething issues initially as people adapted to working from home, and I know I actually personally did as well. I mean, we base our business on working remotely, and I still found being stuck inside, I struggled with that quite a bit. But I came out of it now. I actually bloody love it. It's awesome. So, but now there's still, a lot of people are going to go back to the office. So what kinds of problems do you foresee taking place as there is a mixture of people working remotely and in the office?
I think I'm bound to say this, aren't I? It comes down to the technology. So an observation.
Good technology.
An observation I make is that once you've nailed the technology, overcoming these disparate ways of working becomes less of an issue. If you've got a really good, strong communication and collaboration platform that can support the organization and that people are actively using, a lot of this stuff goes away. It becomes a lot easier to have some people working at home.
Slight technical fault, but we're back on. So
Awesome.
where were we at again?
Communication, synchronous,
commitment from management in
time zones.
Yeah, time
So
zones.
keeping people aligned.
Yes.
Yeah, like the synchronous or asynchronous communication. I mean, yeah, that's definitely, we have to embrace the asynchronous because there will be, we've got an employee in Colombia and we've got one in China, and they're almost, well, China's similar to Australia in terms of time zone, and we're almost on completely different, working hours. However, my team's awesome and they will jump on at any hour. But yeah, we have to work out, how we carry on moving when we don't necessarily have an answer straight away. And I think this probably leads back into OKRs.
Yes, because this is like the very powerfully aligning method of getting everybody who's working on something to be aligned and not having to have constant check-in on what do I do now, what's next, why are we doing this?
Yeah, like autonomy, how do they make their own decisions?
Yeah. And like strong, extreme levels of buy-in on those as well, since they're generated by the people who are working on them.
So Jeff, how often are you referencing the OKRs that you've set? Is it something that happens in a stand-up, or is it happening once a week, or is it happening once a month?
It probably was just on one-on-ones. However, because the new objectives that I've come up with, I feel are much stronger, it is going to be in conversations we have every day. How is that user experience good enough? Is that really the best way to make sure we're going to get a customer in the door as quick as possible?
Yeah. Okay. Is there something you'd ever think about putting into a dashboard? Like having a big information radiator of, we can't have that when we're very distributed, but having the thing that says, here's our objectives, here's our key results, maybe at the team level.
Yeah, I mean, yes, for visibility, I would like them to be in everyone's face as much as possible to burn that into their mind. I am actually using a sort of a small HR platform, which I can put these objectives in. I was looking at a bigger one, but they told me that they told me the price, and I was like, we can't afford that. And they were like, okay, well, go and have a look at this platform. I was like, that's an unusual sales tactic, but okay. And I went and had a look at the other one, and it wasn't as good as theirs, but it was good, and it did what we needed. And it manages, those one-to-one meetings. I can make notes and just check in, and also it just pulls in the objectives to that one-on-one meeting, and then I can just always be bringing that up. And another important thing in there is it allows you to send out praise, which is also connected to Slack.
Very good.
So whenever anyone's sort of hitting an objective really well, I'll just highlight it as a team recognition piece.
That's good.
Amazing.
You seem to be good at that. You like your one-on-ones, like I don't know. I've just seen that was a big part of your leadership approach, I guess. Because I was going to ask a similar question, Luke, around how do you how does everyone know what the some meeting and everyone gets together, it's like, this is our objectives, and then they never see them again. So what's some useful, good ways to, a dashboard would, that kind of makes sense. What other kind of communication or ways of visualizing for the whole organization?
So there are several tools that you can subscribe to that do this. Most of them, though, use the more kind of formal structure of setting OKRs for a team on an annual basis, and then doing it on a quarterly basis, and then doing it on a monthly basis. So in your instance, Jeff, I think the way that you're using OKRs is absolutely great. But finding an online tool that's going to suit your particular needs might be a bit tricky. So it might be better to just develop a simple digital dashboard. But are you a Jira user or a Trello user, or?
Yeah, we're in Jira.
Yeah. Okay. So I don't know if there's a plugin for Jira, but I mean there might be that does OKRs, or you can perhaps just set up your own Kanban board.
Or even just Google Sheets. I agree. You don't have to overcomplicate it. And initially, when I tried to get my partners involved, we probably did, and it put them off a bit. But it can be very simple. It's just a list of objectives and some ways to measure it.
Google Sheets and Excel are very, very powerful tools for driving people towards a proper solution. And I'll give you an example of this. I've been using an Excel spreadsheet to manage our sales pipeline for the last 3 months, quite deliberately, because I knew it would just piss people off. So much that at the end of 3 months, they said, for God's sake, get something like HubSpot. We can't put up with this anymore. Oh, you want me to get HubSpot now, do you? Okay, all right, we'll do that then.
I don't know. I think some organizations run off spreadsheets forever.
It's just something that everybody's familiar with, isn't it?
Yeah.
So,
Indeed. I think it's interesting, though, hello, microphone, about coordinating OKRs, and because we're talking about how we're doing that on, in a smaller organization. What about a larger organization? How would you go about feeling confident that your OKRs are maybe aligned from the top strategic level all the way down to operations?
So I, prior to coming to Australia, worked in an organisation that employed 12,000 people. And we had objective setting using an OKR model for the entire organisation. So it was a process that was driven out of the HR department, and there were dedicated people in the HR department who helped you actually go through the process at a divisional level.
Okay.
So it was done from the top down and bottom up. And it was a lengthy process that aligned with the annual planning cycle, but everybody had to do it. And part of your annual bonus was actually based on completing the OKR process, not necessarily achieving your OKRs, but completing the process. So there was a very compelling reason for making sure that once you'd set your OKRs that had been obviously passed down from your big boss to you, and you then involved your team to set theirs, that you were doing the quarterly review process, and that was being fed back into the system. And there was a dedicated system that basically tracked this and gave you alerts if you hadn't completed your OKRs in time.
Yeah, so that indicates a really deep investment in that process.
Massive investments in it.
At every level.
But it drove some very, very good behaviours, cultural behaviours, and it was used in a very constructive way. So it wasn't used in a kind of a punishing way. Oh, you haven't achieved that. It was, okay, so you didn't manage to get there this time around. What can we do to help you achieve it in the next quarter? What additional support you need to basically uplift your performance? So it was done in a very, very positive way.
That's great.
It's funny how it was actually an HR function, which is, and it's really like the whole role of getting the people, like it's very people focused, which is, a pretty important thing to be aware of, I think, Luke, you have a similar experience to that. It just kind of made me think, I won't name the company, but when...
It's kind of like the opposite solution.
Well, sorry. I guess like where objectives can go wrong when they're not made correctly, or how the results of them.
That was more around a KPI-driven process.
Oh, okay, right.
Yeah, and certain KPIs being set up with bonuses attached to them, which were based around employee engagement. And one enterprising ED, I think, went and found out how that was being measured, the engagement, which was filling out all the surveys that HR sent out. And so what was everybody underneath this person doing? Every time a survey comes out, they're apparently filling it out. So
They were gaming the system.
They were gaming the KPIs, that's right, which is like, happens a lot. They're famous for being used as a punishment and also for being gamed. So I guess that's, again, it's one of the important distinctions that we come back to with OKRs, right? It's like having those objectives, having real business value, and not necessarily something that's used to whip employees, but used as something to give people to strive towards and to know what they're reaching for.
And for it to be okay for them not to reach that as well.
Absolutely. And I mean, one of the characteristics of OKRs, which is different to KPIs, is transparency. So if you're implementing OKRs properly, everyone in the organization should be able to see other people's OKRs, because it's that kind of transparency that makes sure that if there are situations where people are not hitting their OKRs, there's an opportunity for other people to jump in and help them. So it drives a much more collaborative approach to achieving outcomes than KPIs, which tend to be it's all about me. It's all about you, the individual,
Yeah. OKRs seem to have a bit more soul to them, as opposed to like a KPI, where there is intention or like there's a real purpose behind an objective, as opposed to just a measurement of, of whatever it might be. And I guess that's one of the things that I am really attracted to about OKRs is especially like in a cascading model where there might be one particular vision or focus at a whole like company level that everyone, if they really believe in that vision, then everyone can see the things that need to happen in order to achieve that. And I really like that about OKRs because it's very simple and a simple way for everybody to understand. If we do this, then we assume, I guess, that it will result in achieving this mission or whatever it might be.
They're much more adaptable and flexible as well. So give you an example. One person in our team, a month after they'd set their OKRs for the quarter, had to move from one role to another. So basically was not going to be able to fulfill their OKRs for the quarter. So the other members of the team, seeing what this individual was being asked to do, said, oh, well, actually, I might be able to pick that up and add that to my OKRs if he's got to go off and do that. So that basically provided an opportunity for somebody to step in and help another member of the team. Now, you wouldn't get that with a KPI. You can't imagine, somebody said, well, we're going to hand you the quota from this salesperson to that person. You just basically double my quota. Okay. How does that work?
And that's also because with OKRs, it's quite anti actually attaching any sort of bonus to them as
Correct.
well, right?
It's not about individual performance per se.
Yeah, it's a collective intention of like I like that about it. Okay, so I feel like, so that's, the way of using OKRs internally. Like teams there's organizational level OKRs, objectives, that cascade down into, it might be departmental or, team focused or product or whatever it might be. And it is shown to be a very effective way to align internal teams on achieving whatever they need to do. I want to talk about possibly applying that same approach, but to external teams. So maybe an external vendor or a freelancing team, a contracting team, having as opposed to, and so typically more so in the freelancing world, I suppose, where people they bill by the hour or whatever, as a consulting or whatever it might be, it's based on time, which in not just my opinion, but it's time invested in something doesn't necessarily equal value. So if I put 5 hours in, does that mean that I'm going to reach a particular outcome? No. I can spend, if I'm good at what I do, I can spend 1 hour and reach the same outcome, but I make less money for it, so it doesn't make sense. So what's a better way to engage someone in achieving the results that the company actually wants to achieve? If they can engage, if they set an objective and put a price to it, is that a possible kind of way to engage an external party? So I'm kind of interested to hear about the 3-week side of things, if that's all right, because you guys are very outcomes focused.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I don't think OKRs would ever have worked in 3 weeks.
Okay.
Because the 3 weeks method is very predicated on highly skilled people being able to produce very specific outcomes, having total clarity around what the objective is or the problem is they're trying to fix, the outcome that they're going to deliver, the key features and functions that have got to be in it. They'll be able to work that out in their own heads and know how quickly they as an individual could do it. So, and their reward, by the way, is predicated on delivering the outcome, irrespective of how long it takes them, right? So if they screw it up, it's on their time, they're going to have to put it right. On the corollary of that is, if they're able to do it in half the time, then they've saved themselves half the time, and they're still going to get paid the same amount. So, the reward system that was developed in our business was totally predicated on delivering the outcome for a customer or an end user. What is that thing we're going to do? And that's what we're going to reward people for, not the number of hours that they put into it. So did we need to have an OKR framework to basically achieve that outcome? No, we didn't, because we kind of boiled it down to a very simple process of just understanding those 3 things. What's the problem we're fixing? What's the outcome that we're going to deliver? What are the features and functions that are going to get us there? And the last thing is, where's the user? Because within 36 hours, I'm going to have some working software I need to stick in front of that user to see how they use it, and then start iterating on that, because it's, that's what Beyond Agile was all about.
It's still a model where it's like you're contracted to the outcome. Like,
Yeah, I guess the difference is that it's quite top down, right? Is that development team isn't necessarily involved in the development of that outcome. It's like, here's the outcome that we want. So you put requirements in, and then we get the features out. And
well, they don't deal with requirements.
No,
so that's the other thing.
That's the explanation of the thing that the feature.
They are very deeply involved in delivering an outcome, and very deeply involved in interacting with the end user. So avoiding any kind of dilution
Yeah.
or misinterpretation of what's the thing we're trying to do here.
Yeah.
It's what that user's just told us they want as an outcome.
As
No, I
expressed
get
by the
that.
user. That's
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. But that's what goes in, and then the feature or the implementation or the expression of that comes out, and then that's what, as you say, they're rewarded for. And so that's quite a transactional process.
It does feel a little bit transactional,
Yeah.
but it's that's not what it feels like in reality. And
No.
you know, I'd say
Yeah.
it's actually very. It's got a strong kind of human component to it. You know, there's an emotional component to it, which is, you know, here's a problem. How are we going to solve that problem? Well, we want to make sure that we deliver this as an experience at the end of it. Okay, got it. Let's see what that looks like.
Okay, so the reason that's kind of interesting to me is that you've got all these people in a room together working towards a particular outcome, and then the team goes away and delivers, you know, their first version of the outcome. But still, that's not a situation where OKRs, if you are not going to be appropriate because, well, what's the because there?
Because you don't know an increment. What is if you're doing software development in this form,
Yeah.
you're not going to have the finished article at the first
No.
iteration. You probably won't have it at the second either.
No.
Maybe not at the third.
Yeah.
So, yes, you could apply an OKR to delivering an outcome from a solution standpoint. But it seems a little bit kind of over-engineered for the way that, you know, these guys were working.
Yeah. So would that be a kind of a signifier for a way of working or an organisation that would not be suited to adopting OKRs?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Because I think that's one of the big questions, right? Who can everybody do this? Is it going to suit every organisation? And clearly, you would say no.
I think if you've got a very strong underlying culture, a very connected, intellectually connected group of people, in this team, perhaps, you know, of 10 people to begin with, overlaying any kind of performance framework, management framework would have been not enjoyed by people. They would have regarded that as this looks a little bit corporate.
Sure.
And unnecessary because, you know, if they're continuing to basically exceed people's expectations and deliver amazing results, why would you want to start introducing a mechanism for measuring that thing when the outcomes they're producing are, you know, almost superhuman? It's almost like they kind of.
Superhuman team.
I'm trying to think. You know, it's probably the analogy that was often used with these guys was, you know, it's a little bit like for people who are not used to working with them, turning up at a practice session with Olympic Games competitors, and finding out in the practice that actually you're just instead of being an Olympic runner, you're a sort of a weekend jogger. You know, there are things that or almost unsaid that were part of the way they did things, which made it possible for them to produce extraordinary results.
Probably seems like a bit of a unique scenario. So I wonder when is OKRs actually when does that make sense for an organisation to adopt, and when maybe might it not? It seemed like a very people-based thing, where a cultural thing, like if.
I think it is, but I think, you know, Jeff's situation is an interesting one because, you know,
right.
he's it's a young company just starting up, you know, has got a phenomenal vision of a product that they're going to produce, and they need some structure around it, particularly given, you know, the distributed nature of the workforce. You've got to have some things that are going to bind it all together, and I think in your instance, probably having an OKR framework sitting on top of a vision is a great way to get people, you know, really visually connected to what you're trying to produce. So it probably works really well in that situation.
Yeah, and there's probably, because I found it interesting when you sort of referred to it as a corporate framework. But there's probably like different levels of implementation in terms of like how in depth you go, and also. For me, there's like it's quite a flat organization as well. There's like, here's our objectives from the top, and we're literally turning them into a second tier of objectives and key results below, and that's where it stops.
Yeah.
Whereas in a big organization, that tree of objectives might be tenfold.
Yeah, it could be 3 or 4 layers deep.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to put to the table here was, how important is it having a vision statement and a mission statement and values written down to get objectives in place?
I think, we mentioned a North Star before, and I think this is, you have to start with a vision, somewhere you have to know where you're going in order to be able to set out a series of objectives that are going to get you there, and that becomes your map, right? And we kind of like delegate the execution of that like down and down and down and down in the organisation, however, whether it's one level or many. And I think without that very clear vision, then I think that would be close to impossible to adopt.
Yeah.
Because that's the first thing that has to happen.
Yes, I think having, I mean, the more popular thing nowadays seems to be a purpose statement. So what is our purpose? What's the thing that we want to change in the world, or what's the, amazing experience we want to leave behind? What's the thing that we want to be famous for? And using the purpose statement to then kind of help to define what are the key objectives for the business that are going to help deliver that purpose.
And in terms of, we talked about quarterly setting. If it's a smaller business, would you advocate for doing that on a monthly basis as opposed to quarterly?
I think it's horses for courses. See what I did there? I think
Virtual horses.
I think it's important that you have a regular cadence, whatever that whatever suits the company. And what is, again, if you find yourself having to kind of reset objectives every month, that can become quite tiresome.
Yeah, it's hard work.
It is, but if you're doing it on a quarterly basis, we're using OKRs on a quarterly basis, and that seems to be working. It gives people sufficient time to properly engage with the objectives that they're trying to achieve during that period of time, and to start seeing progress month by month. So, run a review process once a month, perhaps during a quarter, to say how we're getting on, and where you can see people are not quite getting a percentage of an OKR achieved or a key result achieved that you expected, then where you need to be applying help. Whereas if you're doing it on a monthly basis, you're going to be spending all your time basically working out what I need to be doing to push all of these individuals to achieving their own individual key results in that month. And that could be quite a handful.
Yeah, but I also think maybe they're going to be different for a small organisation, but maybe a startup versus a services company. A startup's naturally going to have like shorter cycles because they're going to be getting feedback more often. And
I think it is important that they kind of roll up to an annual objective, a launch, or to achieving a certain volume of sales over a period of time. So you've got to give yourself a bit of runway.
Yeah, I guess I asked that question because as a startup, there can be pivots quite regularly.
Exactly. I was gonna say the same thing. It's like in startup land where things can just change like that. Like, do you stick to your objectives, or does how do you make that decision around? Are we stick to the plan, or
do you wait to invest in this process until you've got a bit of product market sort of fit and you feel confident about the next 12 months or so?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's still whether how deep the objectives go. I think it still starts as long as the vision is not changing. That's kind of the key in my view. It's like, as long as we know where we're going, how we get there can change. So even if it's the top 3 objectives, I mean, you would assume that they might not change that much. Maybe.
Well, I think the whole purpose of them is to have a mechanism for executing to achieve a purpose. Right. So if your purpose changes, then you've got to start again. But
yeah.
I mean, the fact that you've got a clear idea about what your purpose is and where you're trying to get to, then yeah, sure, you might say a reasonable cadence for you might be 8 weeks rather than 12, you know, because you might be pivoting once every 2 months.
What quick, just a light question just to throw on the table. So what is the purpose of business in people's views?
Doesn't it depend on the business?
Yeah, I
Next,
suppose it
the
does.
meaning of life.
I suppose it does, yeah.
That's deep, man. That's deep. That's a really good question, Jason. Why are we here?
Okay, maybe next time. We are like getting short on. We've got about 5 minutes left, but I did want to chat about one last thing around smart contracts and. Okay, to be honest, so I've been kind of like fantasizing about this idea of OKRs being turned into smart contracts and using that as a way of like engaging people in work. And it hasn't really ever made a lot of sense to really apply that technology in that way. But I was just kind of interested to, bring it up and bounce it off you guys, especially Paul, very understand the whole system, goal setting system very well, and being outcome focused, and also experience in engaging teams. And Jeff, you're heavily embedded in the kind of blockchain space and know a lot about smart contracts and how they can be applied. So I thought it'd be an interesting opportunity to have a chat, to raise and have another chat about that. So I guess the first question is like an OKR system a viable way to engage an external team? And if so, would it make sense for that to be turned into a smart contract to, as a transaction?
I think first question, can OKRs be used for an external team? Probably there's many different ways you can engage an external team. If they're an outsourced team that's going to be with the company permanently, then yeah, because they're just an extension of the company. If it's a short-term contract, probably not so much. But that's where the smart contracts might be interesting. Smart contracts as a way of, I guess, exchange of value for work. Whoever's involved in that would obviously have to be okay with receiving something alternative to fiat currency as a form of payment. But if we're taking it past that to a point where everyone is open to blockchain and it's standard, as I'm sure it will be.
We're with you on that.
Then I think it could be interesting to explore this conversation more, but I know we spoke about it earlier, Jason, before we got on here, and then reflecting on what we've spoken about while taking part in this conversation now, my thoughts have changed a little bit. And that's partly around the fact that, in terms of that objective, I don't think you should be attaching the payment to that, because there should be that sort of psychological safety in knowing it's okay to not necessarily meet that objective.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually, because it shifts the the focus, or like what is important. Is it about the money or the objective? And I think that's a really important point, actually. Yeah.
And they're there as a stretch, sort of.
Yeah, that they're
as well,
yeah,
aren't they?
exactly. Yeah.
You're reaching a bit higher.
True.
Yeah.
So I mean, it needs to be achievable, which is not necessarily in the nature of an OKR, which is always a stretch kind of objective, and so it makes it. What about even the results? You set an objective, but having monetary value on the results.
So we're going pretty philosophically quite deep here, Jason. But I mean, to me, it feels counterintuitive to the whole principle of OKRs, because even if you're building in a reward in the result, in the key result. That's not really the way OKRs are meant to work. It's not a case of, right, you do this, you achieve that result, you get this money. That's kind of counterintuitive for how OKRs are meant to work, which is more about how the individuals contribute to the team, contribute to the organization, and it cascades up and down, and not linking it specifically to monetary reward. So, or any kind of reward for that matter. That is normally a separate conversation. Yes, based on achievement of your OKRs, maybe, over a long period of time, but to explicitly link a monetary outcome to, or a financial outcome to an OKR sounds kind of counterintuitive to me. I don't know. How do you guys feel?
Yes. I think the whole point is that they are both top down and bottom up, and because of that, I think that it would be unreasonable to attach that monetary outcome, because there's going to be also a kind of, obviously, if we attach money to those, then we've kind of got some kind of conflicting priorities as well. Because
it creates some complications if you stick to the transparency rule.
Yes.
Because basically everyone's going to see what everybody else is earning as a result of achieving certain OKRs.
Does that matter?
Indeed.
It creates some. It could create some
a funny
problems.
one, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean,
It
culturally,
is.
it's always a sensitive subject in any organisation.
Yeah.
Is how much people get paid.
Yeah.
So suddenly introducing it in an OKR system to me sounds like that's going to end badly.
I do agree.
It's interesting though, like value for value.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's kind of where I'm coming from with it. It's like, so
Yeah.
what is the value being delivered? And what kind of like value is that to the business? And so why not be rewarded for the value?
I guess the trap is that you kind of, there's the assumption that you are, because they're like a measurable thing quite often, that you are producing an absolute measurement of value as well. Like you could hold a ruler up to it and then here you have this indisputable measure of value, where it's not necessarily going to be the case. And of course, it's always very elastic, our description of value and how we're compensated as well. And it's very subjective, but also I think there's a bit of a trap there in assuming that we've got this absolute measure of value.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Based on that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll leave it there. Thanks for that. It's very interesting to kind of, hear those thoughts, and it's good. So, okay, let's wrap it up. So, last kind of final words. If an organisation was looking to implement the OKR system, what might be the first kind of step that they would take to do that?
Bit of research. There's a ton of stuff on the internet about OKRs. Watch a load of YouTube videos. Get your first spreadsheet out and start writing them. There's no substitute for just having a go. And if you've got friends in your own network who've used OKRs, just contact them and say, can I nick a template off you and have a go at doing it? And Google. I think there's one in Google Sheets for OKRs. I think there is. Yeah.
There's some
there's
really
one in Microsoft Office. I mean, there you go.
there's a really neat website, OKRexamples.com or something.
Yes.
Literally just lists out a bunch.
Well, Google set up their very own site to basically promote the whole concept of OKRs, didn't they?
But they use it in their organisation. They're a massive user of OKRs.
Yeah, well, they were like the next sort of wave of OKR sort of popularity.
We were talking of John Doerr before, and so he's the guy who actually took it to Google. And a really good book that he's written that you mentioned before was Measure What Matters. That's one book that I would highly recommend to anyone.
And watch his TED Talk. Yeah.
Oh yeah, what's the TED Talk? What's the name of it? Do you remember?
Sure.
Easily searchable, but
just search his name and TED Talk.
That. Yeah.
One thing I wanted to add was make sure everyone's aligned and really clear on purpose as well. If you're going to start setting those OKRs.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, so it sounds like, okay, what's another thing? Okay, well, if they weren't ready to adopt the OKR methodology or system, what's an alternative thing that they could do to make sure that, a different kind of goal setting technique that might work as well? Any kind of
like other
suggestions?
processes of achieving alignment.
Yeah.
Use KPIs. Keep it simple, stupid.
Very good.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think that, does anybody have anything else I'd like to add or chat about? Because
It's been an enjoyable conversation, guys.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for bringing us together.
Thank you, Jason. It's been a
Fabulously
real
illuminating.
pleasure, actually. So what was the kind of takeaway for you guys, in terms of maybe OKRs? I've got some lessons from it, especially around smart contracts, or maybe that's not, a viable kind of thing. But I feel like a company having purpose is a key part to forming meaningful OKRs. It seems like that was the kind of real sense from the conversation.
Everyone in the organisation having alignment with each other and where they want the business to go. Yeah.
Yeah, I think having a purpose and a deep level of engagement across the organisation. Otherwise, it's a non-starter.
Yeah, and actively promoting it internally, transparency, sharing with other people. One of the observations I make about the first time we completed OKRs was a huge difference in the quality of the OKRs that were created. And what we had to do was basically assign one person in the team to help other people, coach them on how to write a good quality OKR, so that at least there was some consistency across the piece in terms of content and the way things were being expressed. But that also helped to create the alignment thing. So, asking people who may not be brilliant communicators to write their own OKRs can be a bit of a stretch. So the fact if you can find somebody in the business who's good with words, who can basically sit down and mentor and coach people to help them write their own OKRs, is a very positive thing to do.
Amazing. Yeah, sure.
Well, again, thank you very much. And also some other thanks. Thank you to This Thing of Ours. Chris, behind the scenes, you've done an amazing job setting all that up. Thank you very much. And then also to Work Club for the awesome space you see behind us. And I think that's all for now. Yeah, so we'll see you next
Jason.
month. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you.
Thanks.